I would like to thank the organizers for organizing this really important and exciting conference. When I saw the flyer and I looked at the title, I was really excited. Powerful migrations. Powerful migrations. And then I thought some of the organizers must have talked to the Gurage people, because as you can see from these proverbs and sayings, there is a Gurage proverb which says, "Agrdangano kinzegao," which means your feet, mobility, migration leads you to wealth, but sitting and you're behind can lead you poverty. So this is a very important cultural framework for the people I studied. And they also use this framework to talk about work, the importance of work, hard work in particular. And so in that regard, we are in kinship in constructing the title of the conference. I'm also grateful to be in the company of, giants like Nida, and it's really an honor for me to be part of this panel. So the Gurage, they define themselves as, from this proverb, migration is very, very important. And it's not just them, but all Ethiopians, non-Gurage Ethiopians recognize that. So you can see from this proverb, the Amharic is the national language of Ethiopia. Gurage na Land Rover but yellam, which means there's nowhere Gurage and Land Rover do not reach. You're going to find them everywhere, even here. You can look at me. I am a native Gurage. In anthropology, we like positioning ourselves. So I am from that group. And, you can truly find us everywhere. So the presentation is part of a large study that I carried out on how the Gurage in Ethiopia have transformed themselves from a position as a subjugated rural minority ethnic group to the leading capitalists in the nation, and how the transformation reshaped Gurageness and Ethiopia's ethnic landscape. So that's where this presentation is coming from. My research deals with the larger anthropological questions of how and why some individuals and groups become more successful in entrepreneurship and what it means to be a successful entrepreneur in a variety of socio-cultural contexts. I have written about Gurage's culture and histories elsewhere, as the introducer mentioned earlier. And this is like a third leg of my research. In the first one, I conducted research on the ways in which Gurage were dispossessed by the ruling class Amhara group from the north, and how they lost their land, their property, and whatnot, and they were reduced to serfdom. And the second one, that disposition generated migration, as Nina was pointing out. That's typical to many marginalized groups from around the world. So here, the Gurage are one of the 86 ethnic groups. The Gurage are one of the 86 ethnic groups. I'm sorry. The Gurage, one of the 86 ethnic groups, the Gurage people are known for their large-scale nationwide migration, which gave birth to the entrepreneurial cultures within the local global nexus of capitalism. based on 2 years of, here is the map of the Gurage within Ethiopia. Based on 2 years of multi-sided ethnographic fieldwork, extensive interviews with individual Gurage entrepreneurs and people in their social circles, and archival research, I examined 3 core questions. 1, how and why did Gurage become successful entrepreneurs? 2, what can, what can the Gurage study tell us about identity formation in Ethiopia and beyond? 3rd, what is the current landscape of Gurage business cultures? So my findings demonstrate that a combination of 3 factors interpolate to result in Gurage success. These 3 factors are individual attributes, such as persistence and hard work, cultural factors, or ethnic capital, ethnic institutions, and political structure opportunities, including support from the national government in the form of laws and financial backing. Through the process of becoming and being successful business actors, Gurage entrepreneurs have transformed both Gurage and Ethiopian national cultures, reshaping wider domains of interethnic, economic, multi-ethnic, economic and political relations in an imperial state. Here I focus on how Gurage emerged as successful entrepreneurs and how they shaped the Ethiopian nationhood. Just to provide a little background, Ethiopia is one of the crossroads where the cultures and peoples of Africa, Asia, and Europe interacted for centuries. And the Gurage, the agrarian Gurage are sedentary agriculture is based on farming, especially growing a particular food crop called insects. And the first anthropologists who put these people on the global ethnographic landscape was American anthropologist from Berkeley by the name William Schack. And his book is called The Gurage, A People of Insect Culture. The name Gurage does not signify a homogeneous entity. Rather, it refers to a contested, differentiated, and changing social space that encompasses various sub-ethnic and sub-regional groups. These different groupings exhibit important internal differences and divergent histories and traditions that bring them pride. Understanding these shifting meanings and internal variations within agrarian Gurage society are crucial to understanding migratory and entrepreneurial trajectories of each sub-ethnic group and other sub-sectoral specializations. The word Gurage is a name created through the historical narratives about the migratory experience of the real or imagined ancestors of the people who are now ethnically categorized as Gurage in Ethiopia. Gurage entrepreneurial cultures evolved in the emergent nation state of Ethiopia, which was marked by an underdeveloped capitalist economy. The modern Ethiopian nation state resulted mainly from imperial conquests of Emperor Menelik and during the second half of the 19th century. The rise of Menelik's empire impacted the Gurage in 3 major ways. First, Menelik's campaigns in the southern and southwestern part of present-day Ethiopia resulted in the founding of Addis Ababa in 1886 and the conquest of the Gurage and their lands in 1888. The Gurage were defeated after 14 years of resisting Menelik's expansionist forces, other ethnic groups living in the region were also subjugated. Second, these national political events gave birth to new feudalistic relationships, locally known as landlord-tribute-payer relationship. The previously free subsistence agriculturists Gurage were dispossessed, defined as serfs, and reduced to second-rate citizens, obliged to pay heavy tributes and to provide services such as corvée labor to the Amhara-dominating ruling class. They were subjected to economic exploitation and social and cultural suppression. These new relationships triggered Gurage urban migration to Addis Ababa and other urban areas, which provided the basis for the evolution of Gurage entrepreneurial cultures. Gurage migrations and business cultures emerged as forms of both Gurage resistance against and contribution to the emergent nation state. Gurage migration and business cultures then became part of the Ethiopian national imaginaries, as evidenced in the national Amharic proverbs that I showed you, the Gurage na Land Rover የማይደርሱበት የለም, which means there is no place where the Gurage and Land Rover do not reach. The saying refers to Gurage's large-scale migration, which has made them the most mobile social group in the country. They played crucial part in modern Ethiopian nation and city makings. They became part of nation building. The third impact was of the rise of Menelik's empire was that it also created a national context for Gurage migrations, including the birth of Addis Ababa as a capital city and other urban developments, and the evolution of expatriate entrepreneurship in the emergent capital city and modern imperialist nation state. So it's a fascinating development, the ways in which Gurage turned to be successful entrepreneurs. They were subjugated and conquered, but they turned the whole thing around and they became the national bourgeoisie later on. So they used migrations and other political structure opportunities to their advantage. So they evolved from their labor process in the context of modern nation state of Ethiopia, interacting with global capitalism that tapped into Ethiopian commodities with high international demands, such as coffee and animal skins. Back then, there was no oil and other strategic commodities. These were one of among the most lucrative trade items, coffee and animal hides and skins. This was the period when colonialism and global trade circuits linked Africa to Europe, the US, Asia, and the Middle East, with Aden in Yemen serving as the hub for this network of trade in coffee, skins, and other items. Aden largely evolved from the British colonial rules in the Middle East and Asia, particularly India, and facilitated the flows of capital, labor, goods into and out of Ethiopia, which is located on the other side of the Red Sea. As a result of these circuits, expats such as Yemeni Arabs, Indians, Armenians, Greeks, and others monopolized the Ethiopian commercial sector for decades until the Gurage replaced them between the 1940s and 1970s. This trend also took place in West Africa. The Levantines, especially the Lebanese and the Syrians, dominated commercial sector as well. And it was also the time when Europeans colonized most African countries except for Liberia and Ethiopia. Ethiopia has never been fully colonized by Europeans, as Ethiopians defended themselves by defeating the Italians at the famous Battle of Adwa in 1896, and resisting the Italians in their second attempt to colonize Ethiopia 40 years later. As such, the evolution of Gurage business cultures and Addis Ababa, the capital city, and the emergent nation state itself co-constituted one another socio-historically. And I talk about the theoretical framework. You know, entrepreneurs, students of entrepreneurs have been studying the issues of entrepreneurship and entrepreneur for centuries. And I built my discussion on the topical literature on two streams. There are two streams that have been developed, the cultural stream and the structural stream. The cultural stream was pioneered by Max Weber with his book, which was published in 1904. And he tried to explain the emergence of modern capitalism, European, Western capitalism, in terms of the Protestant work ethic. And subsequently, his line of thinking produced other cultural theories, you know, ethnic culture, ethnic institution theories. The second stream is structural, where, you know, partly it's influenced by Marx's theory of conflict and, you know, class analysis, and they talk about structural relations, kinship, and whatnot. So I'm not going to get into those literature review, but I building on this and other topical studies, I theorize Gurage entrepreneurship as a form of social movement through which people craft their identities. Operationally, I use the term social movement as a theoretical framework to refer to the processes of building businesses as a self-crafting enterprise, linking it to the entrepreneurial making of individual and collective selves. Thus, seeing Gurage entrepreneurialism as a social movement allows us to see entrepreneurship beyond its profit-making and enterprise-building dimensions, opening new possibilities for looking at entrepreneurialism as an identity-making process as well. In the case of the Gurage, who became the preeminent entrepreneurs of Ethiopia, understanding how they became who they are now is critical, because we cannot explain who and how they are today without some reflection on their past and on larger historical events at the national Ethiopian level. Thus, in the following, I tell a historical story of the making of the Gurage entrepreneurial class. I'm going to share some excerpts here. One of my respondents say, when I asked him a question as to how did you become a successful entrepreneur, he said, we are children of souk badirati, street vending. And the key to success in business is high maintenance and constant attention to it. Another one said, quote, a hotel business is like a child. Both require constant attention and maintenance. If you don't nurture them, they won't grow. And there was another one, quote, I think it is because of my efforts. Becoming successful takes your own efforts. You have to work hard, and I did. I did everything I could. I worked as cook in the kitchen, as a waitress serving my customers, as a manager of my restaurants, as a purchaser of items needed for my business. What didn't I do? End of quote. So that's one of my women respondents. So these quotes illuminate aspects of Gurage entrepreneurial success story. Gurage entrepreneurs transformed themselves from serfs in into urban employees, and then into owners and managers of successful business enterprises, becoming an Ethiopian capitalist class. A dialectical interplay between the personal, cultural, and structural institutional forces supported Gurage entrepreneurial success and their rise as a national bourgeoisie. I illustrate this dialectical interplay by examining the complicated differences and debates among Gurage and non-Gurage people about entrepreneurial meanings, identities, ideologies, and politics. To demonstrate how this happened, I explore the nexus of the personal, cultural, and structural and social factors in Gurage's success by analyzing the stories of pioneer Gurage entrepreneurs, as told by the entrepreneurs themselves and or by people in their social circles. I examine example stories of four pioneer entrepreneurs: Haji Rahmato, Bushra, Haji Lagasa, Sharif, Kanyazmach Taka Egano, Kasa Haile, and Zani. Their stories highlight the importance of individual initiative, kinship, and political structure opportunities in Gurage entrepreneurial success. The narratives also illustrate the historical relationships between Gurage entrepreneurialism and global capitalist markets as represented by the Arab, French, British, and American firms. To look at the story of Haji Rahmato, who was one of the most significant pioneers of Gurage entrepreneurs, who began working in a labor-intensive jobs and played an instrumental role in the development of the Gurage as a dominant urban labor force and entrepreneurial power until he died in June 1960. His stories were told to me by his nephews, Ali Usman and Jamal Usman, who were raised, sent to school, and hired by Haji Rahmato and his grandson. Qadir Muhammad, who also grew up in close interaction with his grandfather. Sometime at the turn of the 20th century, Haji Rahmato migrated to Addis Ababa from the rural Silte subgroup of Eastern Gurage. Like many other Gurage migrants, he followed his cousin Haji Musa, where Rahmato stayed for some time before he started working. Musa worked as a porter at the Base Company. The Base Company was a multinational conglomerate owned by Antonin Base, a French-born British tycoon. Rahmato found a job as a porter at Base as well. Although the young Gurage man started as a daily laborer, Rahmato was later promoted to a position of Kotari, which means a person who can count. In his capacity, he counted the incoming and outgoing animal skins and hides, which he tied in bundles in preparation for export to Europe and the US, namely Glovetown in upstate New York, under the supervision of Arab and Indian workers. Rahmato moved from a coolie, a daily laborer, to a Kotari, which is a person who can count, to a foreman, and eventually to the deputy manager and business partner of the Base firm. He then created his own business in import-export trade and real estate fields. Rahmato's entrepreneurial trajectories were defined partially by historic moments of his encounters with Base, the founder, owner, and manager of the Base Company. Jamal, his nephew, tells the story of Rahmato's first encounter as follows. Quote, "My uncle, Rahmato, worked hard as a daily laborer under the supervision of Arab counters. One day, a certain Ethiopian merchant brought a truck loaded with animal skins and hides and delivered it to the Base Company. During such deliveries, the incoming skins and hides were counted by the Arabs and Rahmato. The next day, Rahmato was off from work for a funeral of one of his relatives. When the merchant who delivered the items the day before came to collect his money from Base, then Base instructed the Arab counters to tell him how many pieces of skins and hides the merchant delivered in order to calculate how much he owed the merchant. For some reason, the Arabs' record was inaccurate, and they were unable to answer Bess's question. Having gotten mad at them, Bess asked the Arabs, "Was that young Habesha, Ethiopian man, with you when you counted? Where is he?" And the Arabs told Bess that Rahmat was with them counting the incoming hides and skins, and that he was off for that day. Then Bess told the Arabs to look for and bring Rahmat to him. He also told the merchant that he would not be able to know how much money to pay him until Bess could find out from Rahmat. The Arabs sent another Silte Gurage to bring Rahmat to the company, which he did. The Arabs told Bess that Rahmat was back at the company. Bess instructed the Arabs to bring Rahmat to his office, where he asked the young Gurage worker if he knew the number of skins and hides that the merchant delivered the day before. As a matter of chance, Rahmat counted all the incoming skins and hide. He did the counting by tens, making notes, using a rope for each set of 10 pieces of skins. As Rahmat was then lacked modern education and did not know how to write and read, he always used a traditional Gurage counting method to do his job and keep the records right. Even though Rahmat used a traditional counting method, he did the job right. Bess told his Arab and Indian workers that Rahmat, as of that day, was his Habesha son. He also ordered his Faranji expat workers that all counting should be done with and only in the presence of Rahmat, who as a result became Bess's son. Furthermore, Bess hired a private teacher for Rahmat who taught him to write and read, who taught him how to write and read, as well as basic accounting skills in the evening, as he was too busy working during the day. As a result, Rahmat became a manager at the base, the second person to the owner, and began new businesses in partnership with Bess. End of quote. Are we okay? Oh, already? This story provides insights into how the transferred and transformed aspects of village values and skills, such as Gurage counting and Gurage expatriate interaction, contributed to the evolution of successful Gurage entrepreneurialism. It also reveals how early Gurage transitioned from ethnic Gurage entrepreneurs to national and transnational capitalists who operated the global circuits that facilitated border-crossing entrepreneurial transactions and laid the foundations for further expansion of Gurage entrepreneurial nationally and globally. So I'm going to just wrap up because I'm told that I have a limited time. So what happened is that this story is a representative of all the successful entrepreneurs that I interviewed, and mostly the story is that they started from labor-intensive activities such as shoe shining and street vending, and they made their way up to capital-intensive activities. And some of them used cultural capital, ethnic capital, such as ROSCAS, rotating credit association institutions. In Ethiopia, it's called UKUB. And kinship was very, very important in terms of finding the first job, and also having access to mostly for unpaid labor, family labor. The wives, the daughters, the sons usually were not paid. Once these individuals became successful and engaged in extensive businesses. So the other important aspect of this is that these people who the Gurage were working for, like the Indians and the Arabs, the many Arabs and others, were themselves dispossessed to begin with because of colonialism. So that's the penetrating insight that Nina was underscoring earlier, is that, there is this emplacement, as you call it, and they came together and they formed alliance and they worked, for their kiosks, and over a period of time, their workers picked up the trade. They learned how to do things, and eventually they took over. And that's typical for many, many marginalized groups in Africa, in Asia, and elsewhere. I will stop here. And if you have any questions. Questions? Yeah.
I admire your talk because I think your model of how people who are marginalized can use extremely hard work to work their way up. And I thought of a Chinese film you might like to see if you haven't already. It's called Takeout. And it's about Chinese unregistered immigrants in New York City working through up into higher businesses so that they can themselves become, better off than they were originally. It's a model that seems to apply to many groups in many countries.
That's a great contribution. Yeah, I mean this has been used, those paths, from labor intensive to capital intensive paths have been used by many migrant groups around the world. Yeah, the Chinese are the same. They use similar strategies. The co-dwelling, for example. The 2015 Gurage would live in one room, rental house, so that they would save, the money, and they would, start businesses. So these same strategies were used by the Indians, the Yemenis, and the Chinese, wherever the Chinese were. So definitely, it's a shared. Any other question?
Yeah, this is surprising to me because in the general wage labor market, the labor market itself is highly hierarchical. We talk about the social mobility of the lower rent labor market segments, and also, especially in developing economies, it's a very much polarized between this informal sector and the formal sector. So I'm interested in, one, at the personal level, what are the background of these people? Are they highly educated people that just started from small? Or are there any institutional factors that help these people to really move up from the informal sector to this formal sector? But this is pretty surprising to me, honestly.
Yeah, that's a good question, but it's very common. Many immigrants, start from labor-intensive activities, but I didn't get a chance to talk about the political structure opportunities that they were provided with. They didn't make it by their own. Nobody makes it by their own. This is the cultural capital is a myth, as we were talking about earlier. But these people, what happened was, these people were degraded, even by Ethiopian standards. The ruling class that disposes the Gurage acted like, the hierarchy, I'm trying to make the analogy of the racial hierarchy in this country. How the white folks treated black folks or people of color. It's similar. It was just based on ethnicity. It was not based on race. But in terms of the treatment and the ways in which they were disposed and excluded from opportunities, access to opportunities, it's the same thing. But they did what marginalized groups always do. They started from scratch, where privileged people were not interested in. They were interested in shoe shining, for example. The ruling class, people from this was a despised profession for people in power position, right? So but these people were needed, and they picked up, they did, and as I said, they use a combination of personal attributes, discipline, and some of their cultural institutions. They brought the tradition of pooling resources together, which they call ukub, the roskas. And they would pool a certain amount of money every week or every month, like $100 to a member of 20, and then you have that much money to start a business, and everybody took turns. And that amount of money was very valuable back then. And they would start small, sukbara vending, but at the same time, most of the commercial sector, all the business were controlled by the Indians and the Arabs, especially Yemen. And here's the political structural opportunities aspect of that development. The Ethiopian, the emperor itself and his ministries were interested to help develop homegrown entrepreneurs. So they came in. What did they do? I didn't get a chance to tell you the story, but there was a guy called Makonnen Habtol, who was the Minister of Commerce and Industry. And he established a civic organization where he gave a lecture every week on Sundays. What did he do? He encouraged Ethiopians to buy things from the Gurage, not from the Arab. Don't go to the Arab souks. They are just, so, they are not going to leave. If they make money, they are one of us. They're going to stay here, but the expats are, exploiting. They call them, bloodsuckers, The Gurage calls the expats because they just made money and left and went back to Yemen or India or wherever they came from. So there were these interactions, So the evolution is within the context of social actions. It's not just the individual because they work hard. It's not because of their culture. It's not because the state was benevolent. It's a combination of those and more. It's a much more complex process, a very fascinating process through which people, individuals, and groups reinvent themselves as they go along. Does that make sense? Okay.
So we're going to
there was a question.
Really briefly, what, if any, impacts have the recent political and ethnic tensions in Ethiopia had on Gurage migration and or entrepreneurship?
When?
What if any, impacts have these recent political and ethnic tensions?
Recent or historically?
The recent ones.
That's a very important question. Again, I mentioned earlier that the people in national power position were nurturing the Gurage when it was against the Arabs, against the Indians and whatnot. And then over 4 or 3 decades, the Gurage succeeded, became capitalists, manufacturers and import exports, and all of a sudden, the Amhara ruling class got alarmed. They got in competition. Now this is a new power emerging, right? So there was a tension. It started back then, but it exploded during the 1970s. During the 1974 Ethiopian revolution, most of successful wealthy Gurage were among the nobilities who were persecuted by the Derg, the military junta, because they were considered as the enemy, a reactionary enemy of the people. And then the younger generation of Gurage worked their way out. They are always creative and inventive. And they managed to work with the Derg people who claimed to be anti-capitalism, socialist government or what have you, but they call them year-by-year entrepreneurs, which means business in the air. It's just a corrupt way of becoming. And instead of working hard from scratch, like through shoe shining and street vending. And then when the current government came, one of their important agendas was to get rid of Gurage business people. Official document, because they knew if they wanted to control the national power, they needed to control the economy as well. So because of that expressed intention, and they tried to implement that aim through different policies and state actions, and they have been in conflict, still unresolved problem. They are people, they represent a particular ethnic group, and they want to replace the Gurage with their own people in the world of the business,